What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Marina Byezhanova, and she is the co-founder of Brand of a Leader. And Marina, I'm going to formally introduce you in a second. But before I do, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. And a big shout out to Adi Clevitt, who we met through, you were on her podcast. She's got a great podcast. I listened to the episode yesterday. Fantastic. I did an episode with Adi and we geeked out on our favorite productivity tools because she helps people. Basically, she's an easy button for people to produce their SOPs, and their processes so people can actually have the work they're doing and be replicatable. And she does amazing work. Also, because this is an agency, I had interviewed Todd Taskey, who he kind of matches agencies with private equity. So they get purchased. And he has the Second Bite podcast. So sometimes he finds that some of these companies make more on the second bite than they do on the first when they're bought by private equity and the private equity sells again, they get a larger multiple. So it's really interesting how he values agencies, how he talks about how agencies grow on that podcast. And Kevin Hurrigan too, he's been an agency owner since 1995. And so he kind of talks about the evolution of his agency from the 90s. That and many more on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 partnerships and relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do accountability, strategy, and full production execution of a podcast. We Marina, call ourselves the magic elves that work in the background to make sure everything happens. And for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. And I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people in companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. And Marina does regular episodes too. And a lot of times you can find them on LinkedIn. We'll talk about that. But without further ado, Marina Byezhanova is a co-founder of a personal branding agency, like I mentioned, called Brand of a Leader. And, she's been referenced all over the place. Publications you've heard of: Inc., Forbes, Fast Company, Success Magazine, Wall Street Journal, The Financial Post. She's spoken to audiences of entrepreneurs all over the world. She's also a tenured member of Entrepreneurs Organization, and she's served in multiple roles, local, regional, and global leadership. And Marina's mission is to inspire entrepreneurs to speak up, stand out, and to be radically authentic through the power of building their personal brands. And I'll share her superpower in a second, but Marina, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
When I was reading, I found online your superpower, okay? And I don't know if you know what I'm going to say here, but it's being Ukrainian. Mm-hmm. Talk about that as a superpower.
I might tear up here. It's an emotional topic. I was born in Ukraine. I grew up in Ukraine as well. I came to Canada. My family immigrated after I finished high school. My first plane ride ever was coming from Ukraine to Canada when I was 16. Ever since, I have to tell you, Jeremy, every time I board a flight, I am the giddiest, most excited. Everybody looks like they can't be bothered. This is going to be so annoying. I'm giddy and I'm flying. It's like a 1-hour flight. When I came to Canada, it was 1998. And when people asked me where I was from, I had a very heavy accent. So I got that question 100 times a day. Where are you from? I would say hello. People would say, where are you from? And I would say, I'm from Ukraine. And nobody knew what in the world that was or where in the world that was. And so people said, Soviet Union, Russia. And I kept saying, no, Ukraine. And then fast forward, eventually people started doing business with Ukraine, traveling to Ukraine. People knew what Ukraine was. People just knew of Kiev. So, okay, you're from Ukraine. You're from Kiev. No, I'm not from Kiev. I'm from Kharkiv, which is the second largest city. And as you know, over a year ago, February 24th of last year, war started in Ukraine. And all of a sudden, everybody knows about Ukraine. People know of the smallest villages that I never knew of and will ask me the names and will reference Ukraine. What I realized and why I put that being Ukrainian is my superpower, I put that on my social media, is that, when you're an immigrant, there's this really crazy identity battle you go through, right? Who am I? Who am I like? I don't fit in here. I don't fit in there. Where do I fit in? Especially when going through that as a teenager is quite rough. And then all of a sudden, as Ukraine started resisting this brutal war, and as we started hearing stories of Ukrainians and personality and things coming out, I was like, oh my God, that is my identity. I might have tried to suppress it, become North Americanized, but that is really who I am. And I do believe that the strength and the resilience and the ability to overcome, I think that those are traits that Ukrainians share, and I'm very proud to be Ukrainian.
Also, immigrants. I mean, it's like I find, my grandfather was an immigrant, so my mom was first generation, and you find like there's a certain drive and there's a certain not taking things for granted, I felt, as from my grandfather.
Well, let's be honest also, there's a big chip on the shoulder that you get because you come to a new country. And even when it's well-meaning, you still face discrimination, right? You still face comments and, there are challenges. I'm not one to enjoy, self-victimizing and the woe is me type of mentality at all, but there are challenges. And so you develop a chip on your shoulder and you want to prove everybody wrong. And so that, what might look like drive to others is the internal desire to show that you're not less than.
What was it like growing up there?
So different than how my kids are growing up here. And I know that we say that as parents, even, right? I'm sure that if you talk about your kids, you will say, wow, they're growing up very different than how I grew up. So of course, there's also that generational thing and sometimes thing of privilege and things like that. But growing up in Ukraine was, well, first of all, I can tell you, I never thought that I would see the world. Because in geography, when we looked at the map, I often say this, learning geography and looking at the map of the world to us, or at least to me, was like to my kids looking at the constellation map. They know that there are those planets, but it's more intangible. They're not planning on visiting them next summer. So it did feel very insulated. There was no internet yet, so that we weren't connected to the world. There were a lot of misconceptions. But it was our life, our world. It seemed normal. And of course, a huge, immense culture shock when I deplaned in Montreal, Canada.
If you stayed there, what do you think you'd be doing?
It gives me shivers to think about it in light of the war. I went to visit Ukraine a few years after, we came in 98. I went to visit, I believe, in 2005 after I graduated university. And I felt that it didn't fit in. The country was culturally going through a huge transition, and I couldn't find my tribe. In Canada, I found my tribe among entrepreneurs. At the time in Ukraine, entrepreneurship was just, you had to be some kind of a crook to build a business, right? So I didn't see myself there. I don't know Ukraine as it became later on. So could it be possible that I would become an entrepreneur there later on in life? It's a possibility. I know that right now, as it stands, would I have left if I had kids? Would I have left the country to save the kids? If I didn't have kids, I would be helping the causes, and I would be helping in the war, and I would be helping raising funds and doing a lot of the cultural mission and spreading the word work. Which partially I do right now too.
I don't know, Marina, if courage is the right word, but like I can't imagine living in a country and then taking my family to another country. What was it like for your family? Why Canada?
It was coincidental. My elder sister decided she wanted to study at McGill University. She knew somebody that was studying there, and so she decided that that's where she wanted to get her grad degree. And as I told you, we felt at the time that we were completely isolated from the world. So my parents said, if she leaves, we're never going to see her again. It wasn't this, open border traveling as it is right now, or was up until the war. And so we followed. But I have to say to you, Jeremy, yes, immigration is very hard, and leaving and uprooting your family, it's all very hard. But I have developed a completely different level of appreciation for people who have to do it not by choice. For us, it was a choice. It's still hard, but it was a choice. But people, for example, right now, and Ukraine is only one of the countries, of course, we see, refugees from all over the world, that are leading great lives. I just met somebody. I was giving a talk in another province. I went to a Ukrainian store and met a woman there. She had a business in Ukraine. She was an entrepreneur, successful business, lived in a very prestigious area near Kiev, big house, had it all, had a business, had her family, her kids. And now she's working in the store in the middle of nowhere, Canada, but she didn't choose it. She's grateful because she's safe and her kids are safe. But that is a whole other world of, courage, as you said, that is required to live through something like that.
I want to talk about brand of a leader and what you do. But, I know you talk about personal branding, and I'd love to hear your philosophy on how people should think about their personal brands, because you talk about when someone's talking about their personal brand, you're not even talking about that person's business. You're talking about who they are. And that's kind of why I wanted to start with, I learned this from you, actually, why I want to start with your superpower, right? So talk about how you think about personal brands.
We'll see. Personal branding is fascinating, and you can see now that I started talking a bit more about my story, why I'm so fascinated about the topic. Personal branding is all about identity and how we express our identity to others through words. So step one is we have to understand who we are and what we're all about, what our identity is, and then through the process of personal branding, we just give it words. Really, that's what we're doing. It's not an external process. It's completely inside out. And, and it's rooted in authenticity. As you said, radical authenticity is what we're on a mission to inspire people to embrace. Meaning, I was on the phone with somebody today, and he said, okay, so let me sum up what you do. You take someone, and then you help them look like the smartest, best person in their field, the most intelligent, right? And I said, right. If they are, we help them express it through words and then market that messaging. If they're not, no, we cannot help with that. So really, it's completely connected to identity, understanding it, and then expressing it.
I'm curious, and we'll get into exactly what you do and how you help people, but I'm curious of an example where someone may be thinking and starting off with, okay, we're going to build me up into the smartest whatever person. But when you kind of uncover who they are, it goes in a totally different direction, which is still a good direction. What's a good example of someone coming in, they thought it was going to go one way, and then it just kind of goes off in another tangent?
So often it will happen during the discovery call when they come to us and they say, here's what I want you guys to do. And this is the example. I want you to position me as the best person in XYZ. And then we say, we don't do that. And they get very confused because I can tell you that vast majority of other personal branding agencies, that is the angle and that is the focus. The reason for that is that most people in the personal branding space, those are marketing agencies that are now offering personal branding as a new service. So they're in the headspace of marketing. How do I market you as the best XYZ? Personal branding at its core is something different, as I explained to you earlier. So it happens to us during those discovery calls when we say a couple of things. Number one, your personal brand is an expression of who you are and not what you do. And the reason for that is that as entrepreneurs, we only work with Gen X entrepreneurs and CEOs. And as entrepreneurs, we know that we pivot in life, right? What you do today, Jeremy, is not what you have always done. And who knows in a few years from now, right? And you might not completely pivot away from Rise 25, but you might also get involved in something else. And so if your brand is only connected to what you do and expressing that, then when you pivot, then what? You don't have a personal brand anymore? Kind of doesn't make sense, right? And if you think from corporate branding standpoint, you understand that brand is about feeling. It's about expression of something deeper, the essence. It's not about social media posts and pretending something, right? If you think of Nike and the feeling and what it stands for and just do it. And then they're also selling sweaters now, right? It's the afterthought. So very similar. So with clients, the surprise typically comes during the discovery call. And that's when they might realize, no, I do want somebody to make me shine more than I actually really am internally. But once we get in the process, what happens is that even though it still might pivot from what they expected, we go so deeply into understanding the person that the end result is typically a big aha moment and big internal success and win.
Yeah, you hit it on the head because, my background's in biochemistry as a chiropractor. So
Right.
I'm not doing any of that anymore. But I'd love to talk about, I was looking through your site. I'm going to pull it up here for a second. But I want to talk about Sana Brock. So I was looking through, if you're watching the video part here, you can see I'm on brandofaleader.com. So if you want to learn more, you obviously can go to the website, and it talks about what we do. We'll get into a little bit, which is architect your brand, build a scaling strategy, and co-create and co-execute content. But when I was looking through all these past current clients, Sana Brock stuck out. What did you do with her?
Sana is a really interesting case study, I will call her, and I think relatable to very many people because she is the kind of entrepreneur that really does not seek out the limelight and the spotlight. She doesn't want to have a spotlight. She, as much as in her business, did not want to be on websites, social media pages, and everywhere else. Not something that she would be looking for or seek out. And so for her, all entrepreneurs we're hearing now, you need a personal brand, you need to put yourself out there. But she never felt that desire, like that slight narcissism that some of us share and that we enjoy the limelight. She doesn't. She's more introverted. She's, a very social person, more introverted as well. 4 years after hearing her personal story through Entrepreneurs Organization, of which we were both members at the time, I heard her personal story of being born in South Korea, abandoned at the age of 3, adopted by a family in Canada that brought her here, not an amazing adoption. She never went to university because that wasn't even on her radar and she had to make money. And then despite all odds, Sana builds an immensely successful interior design studio, is just killing it in her space. Right now, she's building the largest community of interior designers in North America. And so the question, Jeremy, is, when we meet people and we look at their stories, you say, well, how? How was she successful, especially in this field? She did not grow up with, beautiful fancy items around her and said, I want to do interior design, right? She didn't study it. So why was she so passionate about it? And then in connection with that, how did she create it? And so for her, what she realized as we started working together is that what she was doing for people beyond the interior design and the beautiful things around is she was giving them what she never had, which was a sense of a home. So turning a house into a home and giving it that essence of a home. And then as we started working with Sana, we take our clients through a process of 3 deep dives. And then we started going through the process and getting to know her. We realized that she has that desire to create that sense of home everywhere she goes. It's beyond her business. It's within her company for her employees. It's for people around her. It's throughout everything that she does. She sees her philosophy is that, things are just things, but it's the feelings that are created around her and through what she does. And so for her, we developed this concept and positioning of interiority. And the meaning that we infused in it, interiority, is feelings over things and inner life of spaces. So you see, when Sana came to us and she shared her personal life story, and there were a lot of moving elements to it, very inspiring. And every time we would say, share the story with the world, you should talk about it, she would say, but why? What is my message to the world? Well, now we gave her a message. Her message became, feelings over things and creating that feeling in the space wherever you are, be it at home, at the office, etc. So all of a sudden that gave her meaning that grounded her story as well. We rewrote her story in the sense of we put it in words. And she has seen an incredible rise in success as a result. She's in the process of some fascinating projects that I have to be confidential, can't disclose, but that will lead to an incredible amount of visibility for her and for her name to be known, because it just angled and gave it purpose. It became about a mission, her expression of self, and not just her story.
It's really powerful because, and I was talking with a group of entrepreneurs about this the other week, which is you really help people discover their mission, in a sense, and put it into words. And then that mission is a North Star, and that guides all could guide all decisions in a company, even.
Absolutely. She put interiority on her product line. It's on so many of the things right now that she's creating because she launched her own product line. Absolutely. And, the reaction that we get from people when we build out their personal brand architecture is, number one, how did you get to know me so well in such a short time period? Like, oh my God, you really know me. And then number two, oh my God, you took everything that's inside of me and you just put it into words. How did you do that? And that's, of course, an immense privilege to be able to do that. And we have so many clients cry when we read out their bio to them, when we read out their byline. Anybody from our very emotional clients to, the guys who don't feel like they're gonna, and they get a bit also, teary-eyed and emotional because it's a very personal process.
You had another client, Divocar. Can you talk about that?
I loved working with Divocar. I worked with him personally. I don't work with all of the clients personally, of course, anymore because we've grown. But I worked with him personally, and it's interesting. We get to meet so many people, and we get to meet them and get to know them very personally, right? We really get to know people on a very deep level. And he was incredibly inspiring. He's one of these people that wakes up at 3 a.m. Before we started recording, we were talking about being or not being morning people. He wakes up at 3 a.m. to study and read. And he's one of those people, every time I would talk to him, I would feel that I need to read more and educate myself more without him making me feel that way. So on one hand, just an incredibly well-read, just consumer of knowledge. Somebody, one of those people who will read about history and will read about archaeology, just reads about everything on an extremely deep level, knows everything. However, at the same time, usually these people, you will find them in academia, people who are just very cerebral, right? Researchers. Well, he is a shark in business. Multiple businesses, young guy, but incredible success, a multitude of businesses in different verticals, just incredibly successful. And so with him, it was interesting. He came to us because he wanted to build his visibility. Not people come to us later on in their entrepreneurial careers. They're not looking to build a personal brand so that they can get more leads. That's not their focus. He wanted to, again, express himself and who he is, but merging all those different things together. And so for him, wanting to merge this, intellectual superiority, by far one of the smartest clients that we worked with his incredible business success, we developed the concept of thought capitalism. And so in essence, we expressed him as a thought capitalist, showing that he's amassing thought leadership, thought capital, but also, of course, playing with a capitalist is a capitalist. You're money-oriented, money-driven. Socialist, he is not. And so that is something that really, something that he embraced. We're hoping to continue, our work together down in the future and down the line. But that was an expression of those very different sides of him.
Marina, for you, what does an ideal client look like for you in your company?
Very easily defined. So first of all, Gen X entrepreneur or CEO. And I have to explain what Gen X is because I realize that most Gen Xers don't know that they are. And they come to us and they say, I know you work with Gen Xers, but would you consider working with me? And we say, you're a Gen Xer. So it's 45 roughly years of age plus, before the baby boomers, also called the forgotten generation. And we work with people who are coming to us because they have a story to tell and stories to tell. They're not sure how. Typically, they're more on an introverted side, or they're just not spotlight seekers, but they know that they can bring value by putting themselves out there. And it's typically people who they have a tendency of wanting to shine spotlight on others, but they want to inspire and make an impact on bigger scale. And they feel that this might be the way to do it.
Love it. We were talking before we hit record about building culture, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you think about this and what you're doing to build culture.
So we're doing something fairly different at Brand of a Leader. We're building our team completely on the basis of hiring contractual and freelance employees. Nobody full-time, nobody on payroll except for my business partner and myself. but I'll be really honest with you, and I'll share with you honestly and vulnerably where that idea really originated from. Because it's very easy for me today, Jeremy, to talk about it as this like innovation and we're doing something new. And really, most entrepreneurs I talk to and I tell this to, that this is genius, this is amazing, this is, of course, gives us incredible margins, right? And we're very lean, and there's a lot of benefits and bonuses. Originally, the idea, however, came from me running my other business, the business that I had prior to Brand of a Leader, and realizing that I really do not like managing people. And the reason being, I'm really not good at it. And we often hear people focusing on getting better at their improving on their shortcomings and weaknesses. And I realized a long time ago that what can make me world-class is finding some kind of a workaround around those and really focusing on my strengths and becoming really superior at those. I'm not going to become a fantastic manager because my level was low. So what can I do that's different? And so that was one of the main reasons. I realized that I did not want to have a team to manage, number one. And number two, of course, as many of us during COVID, we got hit really severely, right, with the financial repercussions and payroll and having employees and what do you do? And that was really hard too. So I realized that I wanted to build something different and said, you know what? If I have just freelancers and contractors, then I don't have to worry about culture, happiness, anybody's life satisfaction, right? You come, you do the work, it's transactional, and that's it. And I realized that was wrong because even when people are working for you contractually or freelance, they're still the most important asset you have in the organization. So you still want to make sure that they're aligned with you on your core values. You still want to make sure that they love the work, that they love the mission of the company, right? All those different things. And so when I realized that there's no workaround that, and actually that can become the strength of our organization if we solve and figure out how to create all that, how to create a culture of belonging, training and development, world-class professionalism with people who are not only working with you, but working with other organizations as well. So this is my biggest challenge and opportunity and fascination at the moment, is trying to solve that and figure it out.
Is there anything that you are doing or you've seen others do that has worked in that realm that you've implemented from helping with culture?
Not enough. So one of the things I'm doing right now is I've uncovered that there is incredible academic research on the topic, which, of course, as entrepreneurs, we don't think about, academia and those papers that you can barely read. But I'm in a research program right now at a local university. And so having had access to the database of research, I realized there's a lot that we can draw from. And so I've been reading some of the studies, and I saw that some of the biggest problems that freelancers encounter are lack of belonging, lack of formalized training and having to seek it out versus usually in organizations where you're employed full-time, you get. So I've started the research, implementation will come later. And then the transitory part of that will be surrounding myself with mentors or advisors that have a strong grasp of building company culture. So if anybody listening is fascinated by this problem and would like to connect as a mentor or as an advisor, I would absolutely love to discuss and experience share. My goal is to eventually win an award for Brand of a Leader being the best place to work with no full-time employees. that will be a creative win.
Love it. Yeah, I love how you're looking at what are the problems that freelancers are thinking about, which and then you'll solve it later, which is going into the lack of training and lack of belonging. So that's a really interesting place to start. I remember
and there are a lot of challenges because even let's say one of the things that you need to have in a business, and we're implementing an EOS structure, is you have to have regular meetings, but typically employees load meetings and then they become freelancers so that they can avoid having meetings. So telling people that you have those meetings that are obligatory, kind of goes in conflict with why they chose to freelance. But then as a business, you need it because we're growing and scaling and we have a bigger team. So how do you find that middle ground that works for everyone, that doesn't create this heavy structure for them? It's interesting. And from labor law perspective as well, right? Because if all of a sudden there are all these things and all these meetings and everything's structured, well, then the government says, well, those are employees and this is what you should be doing as a result. So how do you navigate all of that?
It's a tough question. Yeah, exactly. But I remember, I'll date myself for a second, Marina, but I was listening to the audio cassette tape, Marcus Buckingham, now Discover Your Strengths, and talking. And I remember a light bulb came on for me, which is, just focus more on my strengths and don't just try and boost up. I mean, it's not bad to try and improve things that I'm not good at, but focus more on the strengths, right? And so it really, even from a kid's perspective, he was talking about in the book, and he does, I believe, heavy research. They have a lot of different books. But hey, if your child's amazing at math and not great at English, just be careful focusing on boosting their English and just not focusing on getting them like a superstar at math. So it really opened my eyes to myself of like, yeah, I should be just focusing more on my strengths, like you were saying.
Yeah, it was a realization for me, and I've decided to lean into it. For better or for worse, might be right, might be wrong, but that's what I'm doing.
But yeah, he was talking about the research that was kind of backing up what you were saying. I want to talk about business partners, right? And how your partnership came to be currently with Brand of a Leader.
Partnerships are interesting. You talk to entrepreneurs, most of them are going to say, do not get a partner. I'm sure you've heard this a million times. Why do you need a partner? You can do it on your own. My current business partner, Stefano, he was actually my employee in my previous business. That's where we met. And he was, absolutely brilliant. One of those that can roll up his sleeves and do anything, and the hardest worker. And you can tell when somebody's really entrepreneurial. And he really wanted and had this idea of eventually launching a business together. There was another venture that we tried with my other business partner and him in that other business. It didn't pick up. And then when the pandemic hit and the other business got hit really, really hard, we really got brought on our knees. We went from heroes and we're so amazing and we're so successful and we're just, to, there were some big holes in that business. And so when that happened and there were, a lot of decisions to be made and a lot of realizations, it was Stefano who said, maybe now is the time to launch the business we had started talking about, which was the personal branding agency. And we took the leap. We have a lot of very complementary strengths, things that I suck at, he happens to be good at, and I would say vice versa, which has been incredibly helpful. And making that delineation into what each one of us is responsible for and not responsible for has been quite helpful in staying in alignment with our strengths.
Yeah, and I'm curious. We were talking a little bit about this, which is, and this comes up all the time, which is how do you navigate entrepreneurial impatience, and still stay happy and satisfied, I think a lot of the people I talk to, it doesn't matter where they're at, what stage they're at, I feel like they always feel like they should be further along. How do you deal with that as an entrepreneur?
I don't deal well with it. So I will have no wisdom there, but certainly relatability. I find it incredibly hard. Number one, being impatient by nature. I really have no envy of anybody or anything at all ever. I'm very proud of, not having that trait. But I definitely see myself in comparison, and not competition, but in comparison with other entrepreneurs. That is absolutely a thing. And of course, being part of Entrepreneurs Organization is phenomenal and fantastic. But I find sometimes it's also hard because often I'm looking at the other incredible members and feeling like, oh my God, I need to have more people on board and I need to be bigger and I need to go faster and all those different things. Made even harder when you had another business that was a more mature business. So you're also comparing to what you had before, as well as comparing yourself to others. And I find it not always to be really easy. I'm impatient more often than not.
I'd love, first of all, thank you, Marina. And I have one last question. Before I ask it, I just want to point people to check out brandofaleader.com to learn more. And you can poke around their site. They have a really cool content there and information. My last question, Marina, is you've featured people before, and I'd love to hear some of your favorites episodes in the past.
People that I have interviewed, I've interviewed some incredible people. I launched my podcast during the pandemic when everybody was available and sitting at home, and it was really easy to connect with incredible people. I have a hard time singling people out because I want everybody to know how much I loved interviewing them. And every single person I interview, I only interview because I'm really fascinated by speaking with them. So every time
I'll point out a few then, so that you don't have to pick a favorite.
But every time I introduce people, I always say, I am so excited to be. I'm like, oh my God, I say it every time, but I'm excited. But okay, go ahead, point out.
So I'd love you to talk maybe, I don't know if you remember any takeaways or just any thoughts. You had the chief heart officer of VaynerMedia, Claude Silver. You had Sam Horn, was a best-selling author and global speaker. So I don't know if anything sticks out with the chief heart officer of VaynerMedia.
Definitely. So that was an amazing win because, well, first of all, I'm a huge fan of Gary Vaynerchuk. His business is scaling, and talking to his head HR person with such an amazing and inspiring title was just incredible. What stood out to me is how different of an HR person she was. HR people are usually not respected. And I will say, although many might be very upset with me for saying, more often than not, it's with reason. It's a lot of people pushing. It's a lot of procedural. It's a lot of kind of being bothered by people more so than serving people. She was a beacon of light, of really, truly the opposite of that. And being incredibly just inspiring and leading with the heart and putting culture at the center of the organization. So she was absolutely incredible. Sam Horn was somebody who must have thought, Jeremy, that I was a stalker without telling me, because I saw her speak at an event when I was in Amsterdam. It was an EO event. She came up. They said she was going to be on Skype or Zoom or whatever it was at the time. And I said, this is ridiculous. I don't want to hear somebody on the screen. I'm not going to hear anything. This is terrible. And she was the best speaker of the whole event. I was on the edge of my seat taking notes. I got so inspired by her that I started reaching out to her. I messaged her relentlessly. She never wrote me back. And I kept messaging her and asking for a call and telling her how she inspired me. Never responds. I then DM'd her on Instagram. Instagram DMs. She didn't follow me, right? So this is like a really inappropriate DM there. I messaged her and I said, Sam, you must think I'm a stalker. I'm just such a fan of your work. Can I interview you on my podcast? And she said, yes. And so she got on my podcast. I was just on pins and needles. And when we finished the interview, I said, Sam, I have a very big problem asking people for things. And, this is very uncomfortable, but I'm just going to ask. And you can say no and just like shut off the screen, and that's okay. Would you be my mentor? And she's somebody who charges over $1,000 per hour for consultation. And she said, I typically say no. I will say yes to you. Here are the reasons why. And yes, and here's how we will engage. And I turned off my computer after we finished, Jeremy. And I was like running in there. I'm like, so excited. So that was just incredible.
I love it. Marina, thank you. Everyone check out brandofaleader.com and more episodes of the podcast. Thanks, Marina. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.